Now we'll be hearing from Mark Rossborough. Mark has been a key leader in the Citizens for Quality Education. He also served as the chair for the Withdrawal Committee when we were doing the negotiations with the RSU board.
Okay, what we'd like to communicate to the public in this YouTube is first why we got started and what we want to accomplish by basically seceding from the RSU 24 for the town of Ellsworth. Probably 18 months ago, a group of us got together and did a petition. That petition was required by law, state of Maine, in order to ask the Department of Education to allow us to prepare a document that would be agreed upon between the city of Ellsworth and the RSU administration as to how education would occur post getting out of the RSU. So that vote was taken and there was a resounding vote to do what we were suggesting. We then spent better than a year working with the RSU to come up with a contract that you can see on our website and on Facebook that actually shows how we will handle education as soon as we're out. Now we've come to a critical point in this process. In 5 days there will be an election on November 5th. That election requires that we get 50% of the last gubernatorial election as far as people coming out to vote. Once we've had that 50%, that is roughly 1,700 voters, then we need a simple majority to pass this form of getting out of the RSU. At that point, we would set up an election that would elect a school board. That school board would hire a superintendent, and we would then proceed to prepare for the school year 14-15. What I'd like to do at this point is basically show you or talk to you about some of the things as to why we want to get out of the RSU and what our points are that we have been trying to make. They center around 3 items. 1 is taxation, 2 is local control, and number 3 is quality education. If I can, we'll start with the taxation. The government, the state of Maine, actually controls the dollars that we must raise in order to pick up state subsidies. And I'm just going to give you some figures as to how that is determined. First, they set a mill rate that gets applied to the total value that they have decided is the value of property in the city of Ellsworth. So when we prior to going into the RSU in 2009, our mill rate was 6.79. The value was $938 million. Now, in 2014, the mill rate has risen to 8.11, and the value of property in the city of Ellsworth has gone to $1,059,000. No, I'm sorry, I'll correct that. It's $1,059,000. The cost of education, meaning the dollars that we have to raise in Ellsworth, has gone from $7,800,000 to $10,039,000. If you were to take the change in the dollars that we have had to raise through the years, plus the reserve fund that we had to turn over to the RSU, which was $1,367,000, our total increase in taxation for the city of Ellsworth is approximately $6,900,000. That has gone, those dollars have gone into the RSU budget. Now, as Mrs. Lucas, the superintendent of schools, says, and she describes the whole RSU as a big cake. A cake that all of the ingredients of the communities and what they're contributed. And once they make that cake, they take all those ingredients, then we're all the same. Well, if we're going to kick in this year $10,039,000, and it's going into that cake and distributed amongst the communities, and if the RSU is correct in that they feel they have saved the communities $9.5 million, we feel that our taxes, we don't feel, we know, that our taxes have gone up approximately $7.9 million. It doesn't take too large a brain to figure out that our tax dollars are going to the other communities. And through the process of the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen that other communities, payrolls have gone up in order to get to the level of Ellsworth. Ellsworth has been held back. Educational programs have been put in schools, but not into Ellsworth, because they want to bring up the quality of education, payrolls, programs in the other communities to equal what Ellsworth was pre-RSU. So we have been stalled for a period of time. Let me address, please, the local control. We feel that we can better take those taxation dollars, keep them in Ellsworth through our local school board, our neighbors. Teachers can come in and talk with the school board. They have not felt that they could do this with the RSU board. We have but 3 members of an RSU board of 14 members. We have no say. We can be outvoted every time. With a local school board, we decide the quality of education, where our dollars should be spent. And just because the state says that we need to reach a certain level, that doesn't mean that we can't exceed that we can't demand more for our children in school. We always did it in the past. We ran a great school for many years. Let me go to the quality education. And I'm going to cite 3 different documents. And you can make up your mind as to how well we're doing on education. The first is an article out of the Ellsworth American, October 18th, 2012. The headline reads, EHS Sumner missed federal benchmarks. I'm going to read just the first paragraph, set the tone on this. Although neither high school in the Regional School Unit 24 achieved federal benchmarks in academic scores, they have a lot of company, said Suzanne Lucas. That's the superintendent of schools qualifying that we did not make federal standards, but because we're in good company, that's okay. If you and I are drowning, am I supposed to be happy that I'm drowning with you because you're good company? It does not fly for me. I'm sorry. We took off from the Department of Education's website just a couple of weeks ago, and basically it's how the state of Maine grades our schools. Ellsworth Middle School got a C. Ellsworth High School got a C. If we had programs in place that were increasing our level of education and we were growing and making positive steps, that would be one thing. But the second column is the trend column. Ellsworth High School is trending down. We're not trending up, we're trending down. We're trending down from a C. Not acceptable. The last is, and this has a number of numbers on it, and I'm going to try and give you as best I can the gist of it. The state has certain goals, certain levels of education that they would like to have each one of the communities attain. So in reading, In 2009, this is back when we had our own school, the state goal was 64 percentile. Ellsworth's score was 49. That's not good. So obviously we would like to have seen the RSU to increase our percentile to get up to at least state standards. Well, the state goal moved in the period of the 4 years, and in 2012-13, their goal went from 64 to 68%. If you remember, I said we were at the 49 percentile before. We've now dropped to the 43 percentile. So the margin between where Ellsworth was in the state has grown even wider. It's not acceptable. As far as our mathematics score, the state goal was a 43 percentile. Ellsworth did, it met that. We were also a 43 percentile. But like the reading scores, the math scores did increase on state standards. They moved to a 66 percentile. Ellsworth did increase also, 1 percentile point. We're now at 44%. Again, the difference between Ellsworth and the state goals has widened. That is not acceptable. What the RSU will tell you is that we're doing great. We're having a much higher percentile from the standpoint of graduation. They just don't have as much knowledge graduating today as they did before. Again, it's not acceptable. So what we want to do is, through that local control, set some standards that we can attain. Help our teachers attain those, give the teachers tools so that we can attain those standards that we set. And we don't have to stick with state standards or the government standards. There's no reason why Ellsworth, the county seat of Hancock County, can't be the jewel school. The place where other people want to have their children educated, not moving off to Blue Hill, Bar Harbor, or Bangor, or even people have taken and put their children in private schools. They would rather pay tuition in other schools than leave them here at the Ellsworth High School. That is not acceptable. What do we expect to attain by getting out of the RSU? I've looked at and talked with you about a number of the things that drove us in this direction and why. Now I'd like to just very quickly read to you what our goals are and what we want to have happen. We picked the 3 R's. In school that would have been reading, writing, and arithmetic. Here it's reassess, restore, and retain. We want to reassess and implement educational standards, policies, and practices to align the specific needs of Ellsworth students and staff to ensure their success is paramount. Restore. We want to restore parental and community involvement in the development and delivery of local school board policies, programs, and planning. And lastly, we want to retain our tax dollars. We want to retain those tax dollars that are paid by Ellsworth residents and subsequent state subsidies for the education and the benefit of Ellsworth students. It's imperative that we get people to get out and vote November 5th, and we're asking you to support the withdrawal. We want you to vote yes on getting out of the RSU 24, and we ask you to vote yes. Thank you.
And now we'll hear from Kenny Shea. Kenny Shea has been a strong leader for the Citizens for Quality of Education. He was also on the withdrawal committee when Ellsworth negotiated their withdrawal agreement from the RSU 24, and he was a longtime standing board member for the Ellsworth School Department.
Hey, thank you. Ken Shea. I actually served 6 terms on the Ellsworth School Committee some time ago, and then spent 7 years in the varsity baseball coach. So I've had an interest in the Ellsworth school system going back a long, long way. I currently have 2 grandchildren in the school system that they're doing well, and they're very pleased with what they're getting at the classroom level. My concern is really two areas. One is, of course, funding, because like everyone, I'm concerned about the amount of money that we're spending for municipal services, including education. I'd like to particularly make a few comments on the mailing sent out by the RSU, and we just received it this week, so we really haven't had a lot of time to peruse those figures as much as we'd like. And one of these items I mentioned the other night at the RSU hearing. The RSU on the second page has got a statement that says the estimated payments due, and what they're referring to as the city of Ellsworth upon withdrawal. And one of the comments there that included that Ellsworth will owe the RSU, or actually not the RSU, but owe the teachers that are currently teaching the Ellsworth school system, $1,255,000 in summer salary spread over 5 payments at the conclusion of the 2014 academic year. I think this is particularly misleading. The budget year for school districts and municipalities runs from July to June 30th. The school year and the teacher's contract runs from September 1st. So there's 5 payments there during the summer months that teachers receive during the summer months if they choose to have their compensation spread over 12 months instead of 10. The $1,255,000, if Ellsworth stays in the RSU, they're going to have to pay 32.85% of the Ellsworth teacher salaries anyway. So, you're looking at close to $500,000 that they're going to have to pay for the Ellsworth teachers whether they stay in or get out. In addition to that, Ellsworth taxpayers will be responsible for 32.85% of all of the other teachers in the RSU. And I don't have access to the salaries and the position on the salary scale of teachers in the other towns, but I know I asked Mr. Lucas a question the other night. Isn't this essentially going to be nearly a wash? Ellsworth is going to have to pay roughly $1,255,000 whether they stay in the RSU or establish their own school system. And her response after several questions was, yes, it will be approximately the same. My point is, I think it's terribly misleading for the RSU to put out a mailing to the taxpayers of Ellsworth, leading them to conclude that they're going to have to come up with $1,255,000 for the summer salaries of their teaching staff if they withdraw. It is simply not true. Another item, I think Don Hudson mentioned this the other night at the meeting, is that they say we're going to have a contracted administrative service cost of $329,000 for paying the salaries of the administrators. These are the district-wide administrators, not the building administrators, if we get out. Well, that is simply not true. Under the withdrawal agreement, that is the absolute maximum number that we would have to pay. Any of those system-wide administrators that come to Ellsworth, they would not be included towards that $329,000. Any system-wide administrators that just leave the system would not have to be compensated. Any system-wide administrators that the city of Ellsworth may contract for those services with RSU 24 would not be included. So again, I think it's a very misleading number to put in there when the RSU tells the Ellsworth taxpayers that they're liable for $329,000. The actual number will probably be in the 40 to 60% of that range. Another item, the RSU has stated that since the inception in 2010, they've saved RSU communities $9.5 million. This is just plain wrong. The debt service for Ellsworth High School, not the middle school, but the high school, is included in the annual operating budget of the RSU. That debt service, like any bond issue retirement, tends to decline year after year after year as the interest payments become less. Of that $9.5 million, about $343,000 is actually due to the reduction in the debt service at Ellsworth High School. There's absolutely nothing to do with efficiencies implemented by the RSU, but they put that forth as part of their savings due to their efficiency. Again, simply not true. It's terribly misleading. The other thing that Gordon Donaldson has just picked up over the last couple of days, along with Dan Bassett, an accountant in the town of Hancock, who's been working on the Hancock withdrawal, is that the base year that the RSU is using for all of these savings is fiscal year 2009, which is when we still had the individual Alpha school system, Union 92, Union 93. And they're using a budget appropriation in a year of slightly over $33 million. What Dan has discovered is that that budget appropriation actually includes the tuition paid to Ellsworth High School and Sumner High School from sending communities such as Hancock, Lemoyne, Arrival, Eastbrook, all of those towns. But in terms of what the city of Ellsworth had appropriated, their budget includes the cost of educating those students, and the revenues that they received from those towns is a revenue, it's not an expenditure. So basically, the RSU is inflated, that what I would call a benchmark year, 2009, by the amount of tuition payments that were sent to Ellsworth High School and to Sumner High School from these sending communities. Again, that is terribly misleading to put that number out as an actual savings. They're using the incorrect number for the benchmark year. And unfortunately, Dan hadn't completed his research prior to the informational meetings for the folks in Hancock and Lemoyne and Ellsworth. But Dan is really estimating that if you remove that particular tuition number from that 2009 fiscal year, the savings probably has been zero, and there may even have been an increase in spending. So I am quite upset that the RSU would not put out valid numbers for the voters in these communities, particularly Ellsworth, to review. The other thing that really got me involved in Mark's efforts to withdraw Ellsworth from the RSU is the lack of parent participation in our educational system. You can go back decades, and any research will tell you that one of the most critical aspects of a child's success in education is the involvement of the parents. My experience has been, and I think I'm correct in that starts with parents feeling comfortable with approaching the policy-making board of the school system that their children are attending. Now, I realize I'm dating myself, but years ago we used to have excellent participation in school committee meetings, and they were all very courteous. There was a chance for an exchange of ideas, concepts, and concerns, and invariably it ended up being a positive step for the students. Now, it's my understanding that has declined over the last few years, to the point now with the RSU and talking to members like Michelle DeWitt and Don Hudson, it's non-existent. I mean, Ellsworth parents just do not attend the RSU meetings to discuss the educational policy decisions that will be affecting their children. We need to improve that. Now, I'm not sure if this is the vehicle for it or not, but I'm convinced that you will have more parents involved in the exchange of ideas at the policy-making board if it's an Ellsworth board and a charter calls for 5 people. Usually people are their neighbors, their peers, they know them, they'll feel comfortable approaching them on a personal basis. Unlike now, where they go to a 14-person board, the most they know on that board is 3 people, and they very well may not know any. Likewise, your professional staff will, I think, feel much more comfortable dealing with a small policy-making board than they will a remote 14-person board. Spread out the region extends from Arrival to Steuben. We've got the largest geographical RSU in the state, and it's just too large to administer effectively. We need an administrative organization that either is the city of Ellsworth or perhaps with a few towns that physically border Ellsworth, not this humongous geographical area that we're currently dealing with. And I think that's part of the reason why the RSU has not been as successful as I want to see it. But I want to see the parents of our children involved in the decisions that affect their children. And this is going to put a real challenge to the parents of these kids. Some of them have got to step up and be willing to put the time in serving on an Ellsworth school board. And it's not necessarily an easy task, but it's something that's got to be done. They've been unwilling to serve on the RSU board because they just don't feel that they can have any impact. My feeling is that now we put this policy-making board back within the control of the voters of the city of Ellsworth, these parents will respond. Because the parents I've spoken with, and I've spoken to several, they're just as concerned about the quality of education their children receive today as they were back when I was a school committee. But they don't feel comfortable. I don't feel it's worthwhile to put their time into it with the current organizational structure. So I'm really optimistic that we'll get some people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who will step forward and put the time into running a Ellsworth school system where they won't attend the RSU meetings and they won't participate in the RSU board. As Jim Penny just pointed out the other night at that meeting, that meeting was probably the most important meeting the RSU board will have this year. And I think Jim pointed out they were missing 4 members. Well, that's what, nearly 30% of the board. And if you can't get 30% of your board members to attend an important meeting like that, that's not good. I'm sure some of them had reasons, and and I appreciate that. But we haven't even been able to get Ellsworth people to run for the RSU board. We've got a seat this next Tuesday that we don't even have a candidate for. Most of the board members have resigned before their term is concluded. That's not setting the example of your policy-making board that you want for educators toiling in the system. So those are my thoughts. I thank you for the opportunity to share them with you, and I hope you will go to the polls on Tuesday and vote yes for the opportunity for Ellsworth to establish its own educational school system.